Hello, Haunted Family. Welcome back. Story 1. Monster. I would love an explanation for this. So I can put wind monster back into the same category as unicorns and dinosaurs. You know, made up, make-believe, fairy tales. I'm an atheist who isn't satisfied with explanations of the surreal experience not having a real, solid explanation. I was out snowshoeing through the woods with my cousin a couple of years ago. It was 12:30 a.m. and the alcohol was wearing off. It had also just gotten much colder and windy. We ducked into a small alcove, clear view of the stars, save for two large 50-foot pine trees between us and a clearing. You can occasionally hear cars pass by on a far-off road or a small plane overhead from the small airport not far away. They come and go, and it's very obvious what they are. Well, we hear what sounded like a low-flying jet approaching. This increasingly loud wind did not stop or go away. I said out loud, "That sounds like a jet stream." It was loud enough that we would have to raise our voices to hear each other. It went on for about a minute, way longer than it would take a plane to cross over us. All of a sudden, the wind localized near the tops of the trees. Like literally the wind was only coming from one spot in the sky, and only moving the tops of those trees. This spot started moving really fast, up and down, left and right. Then it would seemingly duck behind a hill, grow quieter, and then pop back up. It flew around like that for another minute. We were, at this point, terrified. We were behind trees, in the middle of the night. It wouldn't have been easy to spot us. After a minute of flying around, it paused for 1 second. It then swooped right in front of us, right between the trees. It was maybe 10 yards from us and sounded like a tornado. It had a subtle thump, thump, thump sound like a rotor. It sat there for 30 or 40 seconds. We were staring, trying to see anything. But nothing was there. I was certain something was about to appear. But it was just this loud wind blowing in one spot directly in front of us. We could have gone and touched it in about 10 steps. And then it moved, out of the alcove that we were in, flew back up into the sky and moved away from us, and grew quieter. Then, this really loud wind resumed all around us. 15 or 20 seconds later, it faded away. We didn't speak a word for a couple minutes, and then my cousin said, "What the fuck was that?" All I can think of is it must be some sort of weird acoustic phenomena. From the wind and the hills and the snow, maybe a helicopter overhead. It was exciting and terrifying all at the same time. Story 2. Bad houses. My parents had this thing for moving into houses that were haunted when I was much younger. Not intentionally, of course. We just happened to move into houses that turned out to be haunted. I had my fair share of experiences. The first house we moved into was haunted by a little girl and an old man. The weirdest experience I had was one night. My parents had gone out to play some darts and hang out at the local bar. I went into the kitchen to get a drink. This house was pretty big. It had a huge foyer, which was between the kitchen and the living room, with stairs at the side. Now, I was completely alone in the house when suddenly I heard someone say, "Boo." I turned around, looking for someone, but couldn't see anyone. That creeped me out. But also I felt like I was being watched while I was in the bathroom. One morning, my dad went into the bathroom, still kind of half asleep, snapped a photo on his phone, which showed a misshapen figure standing by the toilet roll. The third house we moved into had numerous ghosts. These were the creepiest ghosts we've experienced. They consisted of an old lady who mostly stayed in the kitchen. We frequently caught various smells of dishes being cooked. She was quite docile. There was an old man in my parents' bedroom. This ghost once tried to strangle my dad. The last one was very creepy. She was a little girl who had died in a fire, and as a result, her eyes were burned out. She had a habit of getting into bed with you, cuddling up to you, and nearly suffocating you. Towards the end of our time there, we would frequently hear our cat meowing frantically outside the living room door. It initially annoyed us, but apparently he was being frightened because the little girl ghost would pick him up and cuddle him, nearly crushing him. My scariest experience in that house was one night when I was sleeping. I woke up suddenly, went to reach for my phone to check the time. I found that I couldn't move. I had the feeling that someone was in the room with me. I was laying on my side, so I didn't dare turn my head to look at the door. I knew I would see something, and I would scare myself. The current house we live in has a young girl that we like to call Sophia. She stands in the middle of our stairs. I was standing on the stairs one day, thinking of going up to fetch something from my room. I was talking to my dad, and I felt someone poke me in the side, as if to say, "Move." That was a bit weird, but she doesn't seem to be very harmful. Story 3. Chase. When I was 13 years old, my dad came home and told my brother and me that we were moving, just a couple blocks down the same street. We were so excited. We were finally going to have our own home. My dad was excited because he got a steal of a deal on this house. Only $10,000. It was a small house, just 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, but it was all we needed. My dad took us to see the house that day, and that's when the nightmare began. When we pulled into the driveway, the couple that had lived there were packing their vehicle with what they could fit, and they were in a hurry to leave. The couple had been renting the place, and they had only been there for a few months. The lady was holding her toddler child and crying. She warned us this house was evil. As kids, we really didn't have a choice but to be scared. Our father instructed us to ignore the couple, that they were on drugs or something. I remember thinking to myself, how nice the family looked for being on drugs. I found it really hard to believe. We moved in that week, and the nightmare began to unfold. Every one of us seemed to be on edge. Everyone began to change as a person. My dad and stepmom ended up kicking my brother out of the house. It seemed that every day that passed, my once sweet stepmom became more of an evil stepmother. For a long period of time, I was forced to stay in my room. And when I say forced, I mean I could not leave for any reason. Another summer passed, and it was back to school. We all seemed to just ignore the footsteps that were so close to all of us as we watched TV in the living room, and ignore the unexplained dead animals that kept showing up in our yard. To make a long story short, I was in my room preparing for bed when I heard a noise in my closet. It sounded like someone digging through my belongings. I flung open my closet door to find no one there. Yet all my clothes were off the hangers. My personal stuff was knocked off the top shelf. I ran and told my dad. He grew angry and told me just to ignore it and go to sleep. I lay in bed that night, and the noise came back. At about 1 a.m., I ran out of my room. I climbed up on the couch and tried to go to sleep. But then it sounded like a tornado was striking only my room. That noise was so loud that my dad stormed out of his room. He just stared at my door, and then he asked me, "What the hell's going on in there?" I expressed with great fear that I, in fact, did not know what was going on in there. My dad told me not to be scared and to just go to sleep. He sounded kind of unsure of himself. But hopefully, it was going to be okay in the morning. The next morning, I got up for school. I walked into my room and had the creepiest feeling I ever felt. There was not a single thing in place. Everything was knocked over. As I began to clean, I noticed that a frisbee that my grandmother had bought me right before she died had been knocked off the wall and was laying in the middle of the floor. I picked it up, and I noticed faint handwriting on the inside that didn't look like normal ink. It said, "Chase was here. My marks are left on the top bunk." I immediately looked at the top bunk, and it looked like somebody had beat it with an axe. I showed my dad, and he got angry and demanded that I just keep it to myself. But I never slept in that room again. And at the age of 16, I moved out. Not long after that, my dad and stepmom got divorced. Neither of them fought for the house. The house was eventually sold, and the new owners tore it down. I have no idea who this Chase person was, and I don't really want to know. They were not happy. I became a believer in ghosts after that house. Every time I speak of that house and that night, my dad just says, "Drop it. I don't want to talk about it." I'm an adult now, in my late 30s. I have 3 kids of my own, and we purchased our own house, but we made sure that it had a good history and had nothing to fear in it. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to, leave me a comment down below. I love hearing from you. Thanks for listening. Bye! Music by Carl Casey at White Bat Audio.